My daughter called another man daddy at my husband's 40th birthday party. In front of 40 people, in front of me. And the worst part, the part that still makes my chest lock up like a fist is closing around my sternum, is that she didn't do it by accident. Someone taught her to say it. Someone practiced it with her. Someone had been planning that moment for months while I was standing in my own kitchen, in my own marriage, thinking I was safe. That someone was my mother-in-law, Margaret. And before this story is over, you are going to understand exactly how a woman can smile at you every Sunday, hold your child like she loves her, and still be the most deliberate, calculating, methodical destroyer you have ever let into your life. My name is Simone. I am 37 years old. I teach AP chemistry at Jefferson High. I make cheese in my garage on weekends, hard cheese, aged cheese, cheese that takes patience and precision and care. And I am the kind of woman who does not quit anything without a very good reason. I almost quit myself, right there in that backyard. But I didn't. Let me tell you what I did instead. I want you to understand what my life looked like from the outside, because context matters. Context is everything. I teach that to my students every single year. You cannot understand a chemical reaction without knowing what was in the room before it started. I met Derek Callahan my second year of grad school. He was finishing his MBA. I was finishing my master's in chemistry education. We met at a coffee shop near campus. He was sitting at the table I'd reserved online, didn't realize he'd misread his own confirmation email, and instead of moving, he slid his stuff over and said, "Split it with me?" I should have taken that as a sign. Derek Callahan has never once moved when he should have moved. He just makes room and expects the world to adjust. I adjusted. For 6 years, I adjusted. We got married in May. Small ceremony, close family, backyard of my aunt's house in Georgia. Derek's family flew in from Ohio, his mother Margaret, his father Gerald, his sister Patris, and a collection of cousins I could never quite keep straight. My family was there too. My mother, my grandmother, my aunts, my girls from college. From the very first day, Margaret was performing. That is the only word for it, performing. She hugged me at the rehearsal dinner and said, "You are exactly what our family needed." Not what Derek needed, what the family needed. Like I was a piece of furniture she'd selected to complete a room. I told myself I was reading into it. That was my first mistake. The early years of our marriage were genuinely good. Derek had a solid job in operations management. I was teaching and I loved it, I still love it. There is nothing in this world like watching a 16-year-old finally understand how a covalent bond works. Their face just opens. That moment is why I went into education. We bought our house in 2020. 3 bedrooms, decent yard, a garage that Derek claimed he'd turn into a workshop and never touched. That garage became my cheesemaking studio instead, and Derek thought it was the funniest, most eccentric thing he'd ever seen. "My wife, the cheesemaker," he'd say at dinner parties with this half-proud, half-baffled look on his face. But I was serious about it. I started with fresh mozzarella, then moved to ricotta, then cheddar, then harder aged varieties cheddar, Gruyere, a manchego that took me 4 months to get right. I read books. I took online courses. I bought a proper aging fridge and monitored the humidity levels like my students monitored titration experiments. Cheese is science. It is also patience. It is also the satisfaction of making something real with your hands when your brain works hard all day. Margaret hated it. Not loudly, not directly, she would never do anything directly. But every time she visited, she found a way to mention it. All that time in the garage, "Simone, how does Derek manage dinner?" Or, "Nia must miss you when you're out there all weekend." Or, and this one I remember word for word, "It's a quirky little hobby. Very you." Very you, said with a smile that meant the opposite of a compliment. I should have understood sooner what she was doing. But here is the thing about methodical manipulation. It is designed to look like personality. You think you're dealing with a difficult woman. You don't realize you're dealing with a campaign. Margaret Callahan is 63 years old. She is a retired pharmaceutical sales representative from a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. She has white blonde hair she wears in a precise bob, small square reading glasses she pushes up her nose when she is making a point, and the kind of posture that announces itself before she enters a room. She is charming in public in a way that makes people lean toward her. She remembers names, asks follow-up questions, sends birthday cards, actual physical cards, handwritten, with specific details about the last conversation she had with you. People think she is warm. People think she is devoted. She is devoted, just not to anyone's well-being but her own. I did not see it clearly until it was almost too late, and I have spent a lot of time being hard on myself about that. But I want to say something to anyone listening. Smart women get fooled too. Educated women get fooled. Women who analyze things for a living get fooled. Manipulation does not care about your IQ. It slides in through your love, your trust, your reasonable belief that the people in your life mean well. Margaret's primary target was not me, not directly. Her primary target was my daughter, Nia. Nia was 4 when all of this reached its peak. She is the kind of child who memorizes song lyrics after hearing them once, who draws elaborate pictures of places she has never been, who calls strangers friend before she knows their names. She is generous and trusting and open in the way that only children who have been truly loved can be. Margaret identified all of those qualities immediately. She called Nia my heart from the time Nia was old enough to respond to a name. I thought it was sweet. I thought it was a grandmother loving her grandchild. I did not understand that she was making a deposit, that she was building an account, trust, affection, loyalty, that she planned to spend later. I did not understand that every my heart and every come to grandma and every secret candy pressed into Nia's small hand was an investment in a future I had not been told about. The grandma days started when Nia was 2.5. Margaret proposed it as a gift to Derek and me. One Saturday a month, she would take Nia so we could have time together, just grandmother and granddaughter. Museums, the park, the children's bookstore downtown. She sent photos. Nia always looked happy in the photos. Ice cream, face paint, piggyback rides. I said yes because I believed it was love. But here is what I did not know. Here is what I could not see. Margaret had a person she wanted Nia to meet. His name was Clayton Marsh. Clayton Marsh is 44 years old, white, a partner in a financial advisory firm. He and Derek had been best friends in college. He and Derek had also, and I did not know the full shape of this until much later, competed for the same woman before Derek met me. A woman named Ashley, who chose Clayton, and then Clayton and Ashley split up, and somewhere in that history lived a fantasy that Margaret had built and protected and watered like a garden she refused to let die. The fantasy was this. Derek and Clayton's friendship group had been Margaret's dream of what her son's life should look like. The right crowd, the right connections, the right world. And then Derek brought home a black woman who makes cheese in her garage, and Margaret smiled and hugged me and said, "You are exactly what this family needed," and went home to Ohio and started planning. I was not part of her plan, I was the obstacle in it. And Nia, my daughter, my child, was going to be her instrument. The first time I noticed something wrong, I filed it away as nothing. Nia was 3 years old. We were in the car on the way home from my mother's house, and Nia was in the backseat drawing with a felt tip marker on a notepad she kept in her car bag. She does this constantly, draws while we drive, narrates the pictures to herself in a low, focused murmur. I heard her say, "That's the tall man." I looked in the rearview mirror. She was drawing a figure, 2 circles for a face and body, stick legs, scribbled hair. Long hair on the figure she was working on, short hair on the other. "What tall man, baby?" "Grandma's friend," she said without looking up. I did not think much of it. Margaret had friends, of course she did. 3 weeks later, at Nia's bath time, she said, "Can tall man come to my birthday?" "Which tall man, Nia?" "The one with the dog, he let me feed the dog." My stomach moved, but I still told myself I was overreacting. Margaret had taken Nia to someone's house who had a dog. That was something grandparents did. That was normal. But I filed it. In the back of my mind, in the drawer where teachers put things that don't fit yet, the observation without a theory. I mentioned it to Derek one night, casually, the way you mention things when you are still trying to convince yourself they don't matter. "Does your mom have a friend with a big dog?" Nia mentioned someone she met. Derek was on his phone, he didn't look up. She knows a lot of people. A tall man, Nia keeps drawing him. Nia draws everything. He said it gently, not defensively, just, absently, like I had told him the weather. I almost let it go. I almost convinced myself I was being paranoid, that I was the difficult one, that I was looking for problems in a life that had none. That is the thing about the kind of marriage Derek and I had by year 5. We had learned how to dismiss each other without it feeling like dismissal. It felt like ease. It felt like shorthand. But it was something else. It was a slow leak in the foundation, and I had gotten so used to the sound of dripping that I'd stopped hearing it. I did not push, I put the folder back in the drawer. And Margaret kept making her deposits. Derek's 40th birthday. Late August. The weather was the kind that feels like a gift, warm but not brutal, a breeze that smelled like the end of summer. We had the party at our house, 40-some people, string lights in the backyard, a caterer Derek's colleagues had recommended, a cake I'd had made at the bakery down the street. Margaret had offered to help coordinate. I let her. I was teaching summer school that week. I had 3 batches of aged cheddar in critical stages in the garage fridge, and I told myself that letting Margaret handle the RSVPs and the rental chairs was not a defeat. It was delegation. Practical woman things. I did not look at the guest list carefully enough. That is a sentence I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I set up, I got Nia dressed in a yellow sundress that made her look like sunshine. Derek looked handsome and happy and 40 in a very good way. My mother came. My girls came. The yard filled with people who loved my husband, and I moved through the crowd feeling, for the first time in a long while, like maybe everything was fine. Maybe I had been imagining the wrongness. Maybe Margaret was just an eccentric mother-in-law with strong opinions, and I had been catastrophizing. Then I saw him arrive. Tall, white, brown hair. A golden retriever on a leash that he handed to Margaret before coming through the gate, because Margaret was at the gate, greeting people like she was the one who owned my house, greeting him like he was expected, greeting him like she had been waiting. Clayton Marsh. I didn't know his name yet. I just knew, immediately, with the certainty of a woman whose body had been collecting information for 2 years without her brain's permission, that this was the man in Nia's drawings. I watched Derek shake his hand. I watched them hug the way old friends hug, chest to chest, a real grip. I watched Derek's face open up in a way I had not seen in months. I watched Margaret watch me watching. She smiled, she pressed her hand to her chest and mouthed, surprise. She said it like she'd arranged something wonderful. I moved through the next 40 minutes on automatic. I refilled cups. I laughed at things people said. I kissed Derek on the cheek when someone made a toast. I was performing the same way Margaret always performed, and I hated myself for it, but I did not know yet what I was performing against. And then Nia came running out of the house. She had been inside with Derek's sister Patris, watching a movie, supposed to be occupied until cake. But she must have heard voices, or music, or maybe she heard something else, the pull of something familiar, something practiced. She ran across the yard in her yellow dress, her braids flying, her arms already opening before she even reached him. And she said, clear as a bell, in her 3-year-old voice that carries like a song, "Daddy." She said it to Clayton Marsh. The yard did not go silent all at once. It was more like a ripple, conversations dropping off one by one as people turned to look. I felt it happen around me like a wave I was standing still in. My mother's hand touched my arm. Someone dropped a cup. Clayton Marsh bent down and caught my daughter and held her and looked up at me with an expression I will never forget for the rest of my life. Not guilty, not embarrassed. Patient. Like he had been waiting for this too. Derek was standing 6 feet from me. I turned to look at him. He would not look at me. That was the moment I knew. Not that Nia had said the wrong name by accident. Not that she'd confused Clayton with someone on TV. I knew that Derek Callahan, the man I had built a life with and a home with and a child with, had known something was happening and had decided not to tell me. Margaret put her arm around my shoulders. She smelled like Chanel No. 5 and something colder beneath it. Children say the most surprising things, she said. She probably just meant a family friend. You know how Nia mixes words up. She said it loudly enough for the people nearest to us to hear, loud enough to hand them a story, loud enough to begin rewriting the moment before I could even react to it. I said nothing. A woman who has spent her career teaching teenagers how to think knows one thing above everything else. You do not argue without evidence. You collect first, you analyze, you make sure of what you are looking at before you name it. I smiled. I thanked people for coming. I watched Nia sit in Clayton's lap at the picnic table and feel Margaret's hand rub circles on my back like she was consoling me. I was already building my case. 2 days after the party, Nia was at school. Derek was at work. I called Margaret on a Tuesday morning, and I kept my voice the way I keep a classroom quiet, level, controlled, with the specific kind of stillness that makes people feel seen. Margaret, I said, tell me about Clayton. There was a pause, just a breath too long. And then, oh, Simone, honey, Derek and Clayton have been friends since college, you know that. I know that. I want to know why my daughter called him daddy. Children that age get confused about words. You know that better than anyone, you work with young people. She was already pivoting, already making it about my expertise, flattering me while neutralizing the question. Nia does not confuse words, I said. She is 3, she knows exactly what daddy means. Maybe she heard someone joke around and it stuck. You know how kids absorb things. Margaret. Simone, I think you might be upset about something that isn't what you think it is. And there it was, that sentence, the reframe, the soft, pleasant suggestion that my perception of reality was the problem. I think, Margaret continued with that warm, certain voice, that you have been under a lot of stress with teaching and your little hobby and running the house. And sometimes when we're tired, we see patterns that aren't really there. I'd hate for you to say something to Derek that you'd regret. My little hobby. Something sharpened in me, something cold and precise and chemical. Thank you for your input, I said. I hung up, and I went into the garage, and I turned on my aging fridge light, and I sat in there in the cool dark and I thought. I thought about every grandma day, every photo, every my heart, and every piece of pressed candy, and every the tall man that Nia had mentioned and I had filed away. I thought about the guest list I hadn't looked at carefully enough. I thought about Derek not meeting my eyes in that backyard. I thought about a woman who had built a fantasy about what her son's life should look like, and I thought about the fact that I was standing in the way of it. I thought she has been doing this longer than I realized, and she needed a specific outcome from that birthday party. She needed a witness. She needed a crowd. She needed Nia's voice to carry across that yard in front of 40 people so that the story she had been building in private would suddenly have a very public foundation. 2 layers. The first layer, grooming Nia to call Clayton daddy, introducing them on grandma days, building affection, practicing. A 3-year-old child, my 3-year-old child, as a prop in her production. The second layer, staging the reveal. Not at home, not in private where I could react and it could stay contained. At the party. In front of everyone Derek and I knew. So that no matter what I said afterward, there were 40 witnesses to the moment, and Margaret had already planted the seed of a story. Children get confused. Simone is stressed. It wasn't what it looked like. She needed the public moment to insulate the private campaign. And she had used my daughter to do it. I picked up my phone and called my sister. I am a scientist. I do not move on feeling, I move on data. I started with Nia's tablet. Every child who spends time with a grandparent leaves a trail if the grandparent isn't careful. Margaret was meticulous in most ways, but she underestimated me. She thought I was stressed, overwhelmed, a woman who spent her emotional energy on a hobby. She thought I was manageable. I found 4 voice recordings on Nia's tablet. Saved in an app Margaret had downloaded, a story app, the kind with songs and narration, the kind a child opens on her own while she's being driven somewhere. The recordings were underneath the My Stories folder. Nia must have saved them by accident, the way children accidentally screenshot things, accidentally record things. accidentally preserve the evidence of what the adults around them are doing. Margaret's voice, clear, warm, practicing. Who is that, my heart? Is that your daddy? Nia's voice, high and small, Daddy. That's right, say it again, Daddy. Daddy. Good girl, and what do we say when we see Daddy? Run and hug. That's right, baby, run and hug Daddy. Doesn't that make Grandma happy? I sat on the floor of my bedroom and listened to that recording 4 times. The fifth time I listened, I pressed record on my own phone. Then I sat quietly for a very long time. I was not crying. I was past crying. I was in the cold clarity that comes when you have been in a crisis long enough that your nervous system stops trembling and starts calculating. I called my sister. I called my mother. I called my best friend Deja, who works in family law. I did not call Derek. Derek came home that night and I watched him the way I used to watch chemical experiments at the start of a reaction, waiting for the indicator. He was quiet. He reheated the food I'd left for him. He kissed the top of my head in passing. He asked if Nia had eaten well. He never asked about the party. He never brought up Clayton. He never addressed the silence that had been sitting between us like a third person in the house since Sunday. So I asked him, I said, Derek, when did you find out that your mother was taking Nia to Clayton's house? He set down his fork. I watched his jaw work. I watched him decide. I watched him choose the wrong thing. She mentioned she'd run into him once. Just once at the park. It wasn't. Derek. She said Nia wanted to pet his dog. It wasn't planned. Derek, I have recordings. He went very still. I have recordings of your mother teaching our daughter to call Clayton Daddy. Multiple sessions. Multiple occasions. This was not a park encounter. This was not a coincidence. Your mother was introducing our child to a man she wanted in our lives and coaching her on what to call him, and she used our daughter as a performance at your birthday party. And you knew some version of this was happening and you said nothing. The silence stretched out long and terrible. I didn't know it was that, he said finally. I thought maybe she'd mentioned him a couple of times, I thought. You thought what, that it would stop? That I wouldn't notice? What did you think, Derek? He looked at me, and in his face, I saw something I had been trying not to see for 2 years. The fundamental belief, deeply seated and quietly held, that his mother's preferences mattered more than my comfort. That her campaign to reshape our family was something to be managed and minimized rather than stopped. She just loves you, he said. She just loves Nia. She loves the idea of a life you didn't choose. She loves Clayton Marsh and the world she wanted you to live in, and she used our daughter to try to build a bridge to it. And you let her. He said nothing. I need you to go stay somewhere else tonight, I said. I need to think. He went. Margaret was a fixture at Fairview Community Church in our suburb. Sunday services, Wednesday Bible study, the hospitality committee. She had built her social capital there over years, and it was the center of the reputation she curated so carefully. The warm, devoted, family-first woman who raised her son well and welcomed his wife into the fold. I had gone with her twice. I had met her friends. I had shaken hands and accepted compliments about my classroom and answered questions about whether Derek and I were planning on more. I had been in that space, a prop in her production too, and I had not seen it. Deja, my best friend, the family attorney, told me I had more than enough to file for a restraining order against Margaret's access to Nia. The recordings alone, the documented deception, the orchestrated exposure at a semi-public event. She was cautious but clear. This was not normal grandmother behavior. This was a sustained campaign to manipulate a child's attachments. You have options, she said. You can go civil, you can go quiet, or you can go bright. I thought about Margaret telling me I was stressed. I thought about her saying, my little hobby. I thought about her hand rubbing circles on my back at that party, like she was soothing a woman she had just wounded deliberately. How bright is bright? I asked. Margaret hosted a fellowship lunch at Fairview Community Church the third Sunday of every month. Potluck style. Her friends brought dishes, she organized the tables, she presided. I had the recordings transferred to a transcript by a court-certified transcriptionist. I had Deja draft a letter, formal, precise, dated, citing every documented incident, every Grandma Day cross-referenced with Clayton's address, which Deja's paralegal had looked up in county records. I did not go to the fellowship lunch alone. I went with my mother, and with Deja, and with the transcript, the recordings, and the restraining order paperwork that had been filed in county court the previous Thursday. Margaret saw me come through the door. I watched her face move through recognition, pleasure, and then something else, something she tried to suppress but could not quite catch in time. A flicker of calculation. She said, "Simone, what a wonderful surprise." I said, "Margaret, I need a moment." I spoke quietly. I did not make a scene. I did not raise my voice. I did not do the thing she expected, which was to dissolve in front of her community, which would have given her the story she wanted, the emotional black woman, the difficult daughter-in-law, the problem Derek had brought home. I set the transcript on the table in front of her. I said, "I have filed a petition with the court to restrict your access to Nia pending a hearing on this matter. This is the transcription of recordings recovered from Nia's tablet. These are your words. This is the documentation of what you did." I said it at normal volume. Her friends were 2 tables over. "You coached my 3-year-old daughter to call another man daddy. You did it deliberately, over multiple sessions, over months. You used her as a prop at a public event to try to humiliate me and destabilize my marriage. And you did it while smiling at me every single time I saw you." Her face went through several expressions. She landed on wounded. "Simone, I think you are not well." "The court date is October 14th, I said. "If you'd like to provide your version of events, you may do so before a judge. But I want you to understand something clearly, woman to woman, right now. I am a scientist. I am a teacher. I do not operate on feelings. I operate on evidence. And I have all of it." So I picked up my bag. "I hope the food is good today," I said. "I made the manchego." I set the cheese plate I'd brought on the table, and I walked out of that church with my mother on my left and my best friend on my right, and I did not look back. Derek spent 2 weeks at his colleague's apartment. During those 2 weeks, he called 3 times. The first time I did not answer. The second time I answered and listened, and he said things that told me he was still trying to frame what happened as a misunderstanding, still trying to give his mother an exit from her own actions. He said, "She loves Nia. She went too far, but she loves Nia." I said, "Derek, a person who loves a child does not use that child as a piece in their game." He was quiet. "A person who loves a child protects that child from everyone, including their own mother." The third call, he asked to come home. I asked him one question. If I told you right now that Margaret had to choose between seeing Nia and maintaining a relationship with Clayton Marsh and his family, what do you think she would choose? He didn't answer. "That's why I can't do this anymore," I said. "Not because she went too far, but because you already know the answer and you won't say it out loud." I filed the divorce papers the following Monday. I want to stop here and say something because I know what some people think when they hear a story like this. They think, "But you were married 6 years, you had a life, you had a home, you had a child together. Was there no way to save it?" And the answer is yes, there were ways. There are always ways. But a way requires 2 people walking toward it, and Derek Callahan was a man who had spent his entire life learning how to make room for his mother's preferences and call it love. He had watched her work for 2 years and said nothing. Not because he approved, I believe that, but because confronting her was harder than managing me, and I had finally run out of interest in being managed. A marriage that survives through one person enduring is not a marriage. It is an arrangement with a good PR strategy. I chose myself, I chose Nia. The court hearing was on October 14th. Margaret had retained an attorney. She came in composed, in a gray blazer, her precise bob freshly set. She had submitted a character witness statement from her pastor and 2 letters from women at the fellowship lunch who described her as a devoted, loving grandmother. "But you cannot write a character witness statement for recordings." The judge, a black woman in her 50s with reading glasses and no patience for theater, listened to 23 minutes of audio. She reviewed the transcript. She reviewed the documentation of the Grandma Day visits cross-referenced with Clayton Marsh's address, including 2 dates where Margaret had not taken Nia to a museum or a park, but had logged 4 hours at a residential address in the next suburb. She reviewed Derek's deposition, in which he admitted he had known about at least one visit to Clayton's home. She looked at Margaret over her glasses for a long moment. Then she issued her ruling. Margaret was granted no unsupervised access to Nia. Any future contact required a third-party supervisor approved by the court and 90 days of documented compliance before reassessment. The court also issued a finding of concern regarding Derek's failure to disclose information material to his daughter's welfare during the marriage, which impacted the custody agreement that followed. I received primary physical custody of Nia. Derek received every other weekend, supervised initially, with a path to expansion contingent on completion of a parenting education course and 3 months of co-parenting therapy. I did not cry when the judge read the ruling. I wrote it down in the same notepad I used to plan my lesson units. Evidence, analysis, result, repeat. It is November now. The air has turned and my garage is perfect temperature for aging, cool and consistent, the way I like my environment when I am doing careful work. I have 2 wheels of Manchego on the shelf, a batch of Gruyere that will be ready in 3 months, and a new mozzarella experiment I am running with Nia on Saturday mornings because she asked me to teach her. She stands on a step stool at the counter and she stirs the curds with a wooden spoon, very seriously, narrating the process to herself the way she narrates her drawings. Now it gets hot, she says. Now it stretches. She has stopped asking about Clayton. Children are resilient in ways that make you want to fall to your knees in gratitude. She has stopped asking because the structure of her life is stable again, because the adults around her have stopped using her as a vehicle for their own agendas, because a 3-year-old's peace is a direct reflection of whether the people responsible for her are being honest. She asks about Derek, we talk about him. I do not speak badly of her father to her, because she did not choose him and she loves him and that love is hers. I will not touch it. I teach on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays. I grade papers on Sunday mornings and make cheese on Sunday afternoons. I sleep well. I did not expect to sleep well this quickly, but the body knows when it is out of danger. Mine relaxed in ways I hadn't even realized it was tense. I had a student last semester, senior year, brilliant girl, scholarship lined up, the kind of student who makes you remember why you came back for year 10 of teaching. She asked me once, during office hours, how you know when an experiment has failed, whether you ever get a result and refuse to believe it because you've put so much into the hypothesis. I told her, yes, that happens constantly. It is called confirmation bias, and it is one of the most dangerous things a scientist can do. The antidote is not being smarter. The antidote is being honest. You record what you actually see. You do not write down what you hope to see. I gave her that answer thinking about chemistry. I know now I was also talking about my marriage. I hope Margaret thinks about what she did. I hope she has a quiet moment where she understands that she did not lose access to her granddaughter because of my anger. She lost it because of her own recordings, her own words, her own voice, warm and practiced, teaching a baby to say a word she had not yet assigned to the right person. She is a villain who failed because she underestimated her opponent. She thought I was a cheesemaker. I am a scientist. And I kept every piece of evidence. Nia said something to me last week that I have been turning over in my mind ever since. We were in the garage, checking on the Manchego, and she was doing what she does, narrating, observing, asking every question the way 4-year-olds do when they are trying to map the world. Mama, she said, why does the cheese have to wait? Because the best things, I said, take time to be ready. She thought about this seriously, the way she thinks about everything. Like us, she said. I looked at my daughter in the cool light of that garage, her hair in 2 puffs, her hands still faintly dusty from the cellar salt I let her sprinkle, Her face turned up toward mine with total trust. Yes, baby, I said, exactly like us. We are both still becoming, and we are going to be extraordinary.